Yeah, I had a major fail with the audio, but I'm really working on improving the quality of my videos. I've got some new equipment coming soon, so I promise the videos this spring and summer will be much, much better. But I'm going to do a voiceover because I had a great day of fishing, and I think I can still make a great video out of this. Hey everyone, David here, the SF Angler, and in this video, I'm here walking on the shores of San Francisco looking for the elusive monkey-faced prickleback eel. And this is urban fishing at its finest. You're literally looking down at me from the sidewalk. There's people walking around up there, super confused as to what I'm doing down there. And normally the water there is way up above my head, but I went at a super low tide, so all the rocks were exposed, and I could find all the little holes and crevices that the eels live in. And to catch these very unique fish, I'm using a very simple technique with a very simple name. This is called a poke pole. I have a couple videos about it already, and it's just basically a stick with the hook at the end that I baited with some delicious squid, and I just poke it under the ledges, into holes, and I usually keep it there for around 30 seconds, and if I don't get a bite, I move on to the next hole. This was the second little hole I tried right when I got there, and there was this big flat rock with a huge space underneath it that was full of water and seaweed, and I knew there had to be something in there. So I poked underneath, and immediately I started feeling a lot of really small vibrations, and that usually means there's a little fish in there that's shaking its head with the bait in its mouth. And so I let it chew on it a little bit, pulled it out, and this little tiny cabezon went flying off the end of the pole. It fell back into another hole with some water, so it was okay. But that was only the second hole I tried, and I knew this spot was loaded with fish. And I released everything I caught because eels are delicious, don't get me wrong. A few weeks ago I caught a huge 19-inch one, and I'm glad I kept it because I've always wanted to taste one of these. It was pretty good, a little bit tough and a bit of an off-putting flavor. But this day I didn't keep anything because the night before I processed a couple hundred herring. If you fished the herring spawn before, you'd understand. I think I can go a little while without touching a fillet knife again. And just a few holes later, I found a hole that went straight down in between a couple rocks, and it went a solid 3 or 4 feet deep. So I knew if there was something in there, it was gonna be big. And sure enough, I felt a huge tug on the end of the pole. Definitely the strongest fish I've ever felt poke pulling. I was pulling and pulling. I could not get this fish out, and it was shaking the rod and pulling back. And I came to the conclusion that this must be a huge eel, probably, that came in from behind the rock or from another area. And I think the hole I was poking in was too small to pull the fish out of. I think its head was just too big to fit through the hole. It must have gotten in there from another entrance. So I tried to let it swim out for a couple minutes, and eventually I just yanked on it as hard as I could, and it pulled the tip off the old rod I was using as a poke pole. I'm glad I brought a spare bamboo poke pole so I could keep fishing even though that big eel broke my first pole. That was a massive eel, and it's going to be fine because I was using a barbless hook. It'll fall out pretty quick. But that's the kind of fish that makes me keep coming back because that thing must have been massive. With a renewed sense of excitement, I kept walking down the shoreline looking for those deep holes. I found a little spot. This one had a lot of seaweed, so I could barely tell there was a hole there. But when I poked my hook in there, I could tell it went back pretty far. I felt a little tug, yanked it out. The first monkey-faced eel of the day. Just a little one. They get a lot bigger than this, but a great sign that I was in a good spot. I'm still only around 15 minutes into fishing. And these actually aren't eels. They're pricklebacks, which are fish. They just call them eels because, well, you can figure that out yourself. And these things are so slippery and slimy and near impossible to hold. So I was trying to get a grip on it to release it, but it slithered right out of my hands into the rocks. And because these are so well adapted to live in the intertidal zone, they can live a couple of days out of the water. So even though he was in a hole that didn't really have any water in it, in a couple of hours the tide's going to come way back up and the eel will be perfectly fine. So right here I came up to a little drop off. I was on a big rock with some deeper water off the end, and I wasn't really poking in a hole. I was just waving the squid around past all the rocks, and sure enough a little rockfish darted out from the rock I was standing on, ate that squid. I pulled it out. Little brown rockfish. The first rockfish I've caught at that spot. So that was pretty cool. Its tail was all ripped up, so I wonder if something bigger tried to eat it. Anyhow, threw it back where it belongs. And in that same general area, I found a little crevice in between two rocks. And I felt that characteristic tug of an eel. Instantly knew what it was. Pulled it out of the water. Finally got the big eel I was looking for. And they get a lot bigger than this, but This is probably around the average size for this spot. And this one had really interesting colors. It was like a dark olive green with black spots and stripes. And it was pretty cool. After it was out of the water for a little bit, its colors changed to more of a dull brown that you usually see on these eels. But I got what I came after, took a couple photos, and threw it back where it belongs. If you are struggling to catch fish around here on hook and line, give poke poling a shot. It's really, really easy. This is my 5th time poke poling, and I've caught fish every single time I've tried. Find yourself a jetty, a rocky shoreline, a beach, any area with rocks, and take a few hours to get the hang of finding the good holes, and you'll definitely catch yourself some rockfish, eels, or cabezon. Overall, really productive day of poke poling. I was only fishing for 45 minutes or an hour, so I hope you learned something about poke poling. I hope this video was entertaining. We've got a lot of videos on their way, so stay tuned, and I'll catch you next time on SF Angler.